Hello again. There was once a time when anybody wishing to protest about an economic crisis or some war or almost anything else would make a beeline for where Jews were living in their country. They'd smash up their homes and shops and maybe kill some Jews as well. This sort of thing was very popular all over Europe and even in Britain. The last pogrom in this country, which was supposedly a protest about economic conditions and exploitation, took place in South Wales in 1911. And in the description to this video, I give a link to a video which I made about it. Jews were driven out of places like Ebervale and Tredegar, and troops had to be brought in to restore order. Those days are, of course, long gone. I'm sure that viewers will have noticed that crowds of people no longer carry out attacks on Jews in their homes these days, anywhere in the world. The reason is very simple, and it is, of course, Israel. Once there was a Jewish homeland, communities which suffered this kind of thing regularly simply went to live in Israel. All the Jews in Syria, Yemen, Morocco, Egypt and so on fled to Israel. That is part of the reason for the fact that there is no longer open season on Jews around the world. Another is that Israel has a very long arm and will not allow such behaviour. When Uganda helped terrorists who had hijacked a plane full of Jews in 1976, the response was that the Israelis simply flew military forces thousands of miles into Africa and punished those responsible. Some viewers might remember the raid on Entebbe Airport. Benjamin Netanyahu's brother Jonathan was the commander of the raid, and he was killed in Uganda, which has greatly influenced the Israeli Prime Minister's view of anti-Jewish terrorists. The calculus when killing Jews these days is not that it can be done more or less with impunity, but that there is a very heavy price attached to it. Whereas Jewish lives were previously more or less valueless, these days each Jew who is killed will result in the deaths of between 10 and 100 of those who aid and abet such crimes. In 1977, I was living in northern Israel at a time when there was fighting in South Lebanon. We could hear the Israeli artillery firing across the border in support of Said Haddad's Christian forces. Every so often, the enemy would fire Russian-made Katyusha missiles across the border at Israeli towns like Kiryat Shmona. If any single person was killed by rocket fire, then the Air Force would retaliate with enormous force, killing many people. This was the cost to the enemy of taking the life of a Jew. One person killed at Nahariya or Kiryat Shmona would result in the deaths of perhaps 100 people in the area where the rocket had been fired. Precisely the same calculus is now about to operate in Gaza. Well over 1,000 Jews were murdered because they were Jews. There has been nothing on this scale since the Holocaust, and there will be a terrible reckoning. We've seen nothing yet. By the time that Israel is finished, thousands of people will have died in response to the massacres in Israel. It will be a terrible revenge, and I do not say whether or not I agree with it, but I certainly understand it. I would be surprised personally if fewer than 10 people died for each of those 1,200 Israelis who were killed. I'm sure that the final death toll in Gaza will be horrific. However, at the end of it, the message will be very clear to the whole world. The days when you could simply murder a few Jews because you felt like it are over. Jewish lives are now at a premium, and if you wish to kill a Jew, then you can expect to see at least 10 and probably more deaths in response to the death of that single Jew. This is the principle that we are now seeing at work in Gaza. The army have told all civilians in Gaza to move south of Wadi Gaza, and this means 1 million people leaving their homes. I expect that the Israelis will then treat Gaza City as a free fire zone when they enter in the next few days. This will inevitably mean many civilian casualties. I'm guessing that the casualties will run into thousands. When it is all over, it will stand for 100 years as a dreadful example of what happens if you massacre Jews. Once upon a time, massacring Jews was a popular sport, but these days the rules have changed. What happens in Gaza in the coming week will simply make this clear to everybody in the world for a very long time.